For over 10,000 years, the Galactic Empire had stood unshaken, an indomitable force that ruled with cold efficiency. It had been born in war, expanded through conquest, and maintained its iron grip through sheer, overwhelming dominance. The Empire had crushed rebellions before they could begin, annihilated fleets before they could form, and turned entire planets into smoldering graves as a warning to those who might dare defy its will. No enemy had ever survived an open war against the Empire. The sheer scale of its armadas made resistance a fantasy. Its vast fleets were designed not only for war but for psychological submission. The sight of an Imperial warship was enough to force entire civilizations into compliance. Species across the galaxy understood this truth. To stand against the Empire was to invite extinction. And so, when a report surfaced of an unusual disturbance near the edge of the Empire's dominion, near the Sol system, there was little concern among the High Command. The humans were an afterthought, a minor species that had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. Their place in the galaxy was not one of power, but of irrelevance. Yet, in the cold expanse of space, something was moving. Something the Empire did not understand. Grand Admiral Tarvok stood motionless in the heart of the Imperial War Council, his piercing eyes scanning the holographic display before him. Around him, the chamber buzzed with murmurs of amusement and condescension as his fellow commanders glanced over the data. A fleet movement in the human system? One of them chuckled, arms crossed over his armored chest. What could they possibly hope to accomplish? Their ships are outdated? Their technology primitive? Tarvok did not laugh. He had spent decades waging war across the stars, and he knew better than to ignore irregularities. The report was clear. Human vessels were being moved, but their movements were erratic, unpredictable. The positioning did not align with any known military strategy, and yet there was an undeniable pattern. "They are preparing for something," Tarvok said, his voice measured but firm. High Lord Veskar, the Emperor's most trusted war advisor, scoffed. "Let them prepare. A single Imperial fleet could burn their entire system to ash in a matter of days. You waste your concern, Admiral." "The humans are nothing," another commander agreed. "They are barely worth the energy it would take to destroy them." "And yet," Tarvok said, tapping a clawed finger against the holomap, "they act as if they believe otherwise. This is not the behavior of a species that expects to lose." A silence settled over the chamber. Veskar exhaled slowly. "Then let us remind them of their place." Beyond the borders of the Empire, in the frozen darkness of space, something ancient and powerful drifted unseen. Hidden deep within the Oort cloud, so far from Earth that even its own people scarcely knew of its existence, a vessel lay in wait, a warship unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. It was a Dreadnought, but not in the way the Empire understood warships. Imperial battleships were monolithic and lumbering, built to withstand planetary bombardments, their strength measured in raw firepower. This was something different. This was something new. The Oblivion was a whisper in the void, a ghost among the stars. It carried no Imperial insignia, bore no resemblance to the clunky, outdated vessels the Empire thought humanity possessed. It was sleek, sharp, its dark hull absorbing all light, its very presence masked by layers of advanced countermeasures. It was invisible to Imperial scanners, unreadable by their sensors. To the Empire, it did not exist. But it was there, and it was waiting. For decades, humanity had been salvaging scraps of alien technology, stealing fragments of knowledge from forgotten battlefields, breaking apart the ruins of ancient warships to understand how the galaxy waged war. They had learned in secret, adapted in silence. Every component of Oblivion had been refined through trial and error, through engineering that blended the best of stolen science with human ingenuity. It had taken years of sacrifice. The secrecy surrounding its construction had been absolute. Entire colonies had been erased from Imperial records to ensure no trace of its development could be discovered. Millions of people had worked in silence, knowing that if even a whisper of Oblivion's existence reached Imperial ears, the Empire would move to destroy them before it was complete. And now, it was ready. The Empire did not know it yet, but for the first time in its long, merciless history, it had made a mistake. It had underestimated humanity. In the infinite darkness beyond the Empire's reach, the Oblivion drifted in silence, a leviathan lurking in the abyss. Its hull, a seamless black void, absorbed the faint light of distant stars, rendering it all but invisible. It did not move like an Imperial warship, with the slow, predictable gravitas of a vessel that relied on sheer presence to intimidate. No. The Oblivion was something else entirely. An anomaly. A ghost in the dark. Inside, the bridge was quiet, bathed in a dim glow from control panels that pulsed with soft, unreadable data streams. This was no standard human vessel. The technology here was alien in origin, repurposed and refined until it no longer resembled the crude industrial ships of Earth's past. The displays whispered in strange, hybridized languages, a fusion of human ingenuity and stolen knowledge from fallen empires. Commander Elias Rourke stood at the center, his gaze fixed on the tactical display before him. He was not a man of rank, and medals, those belonged to the admirals of Earth's formal fleets, the ones who still played by the old rules. Rourke was different. He had been chosen not for politics, but for his mind, his adaptability, his refusal to accept the inevitability of defeat. A voice cut through the silence. Long-range scanners are picking up Imperial movement beyond the outer system. Rourke turned, his sharp blue eyes meeting those of his chief tactical officer, Lieutenant Mara Voss. She was young but hardened, one of the many who had grown up in the shadow of the Empire, knowing that every advancement humanity made was watched, measured, and allowed only within strict limits. Numbers? He asked. Unknown, Voss replied. They're masking their fleet signatures, but we know how they operate. They send scouts first, data-gathering probes, followed by a vanguard force to establish dominance. If they find anything unusual, they escalate, fast. Rourke exhaled, his fingers tightening behind his back. Then we make sure they find nothing at all. He turned back to the main display, where a single directive pulsed in silent, unreadable text. Do not be seen. Do not be heard. Do not fail. This was the reality of war against the Empire. Humanity did not have the luxury of open conflict. They could not afford to fight ship for ship, fleet for fleet. The Empire was too large, too entrenched. If Earth declared war in the traditional sense, the outcome would not be a battle. It would be annihilation. And so the Oblivion had been built for a different kind of war. It had no need for overwhelming firepower, no need for fleets of support vessels. It was designed for something far more dangerous, precise, surgical destruction, and soon the Empire would realize it was not the hunter. It was the prey. Light years away, in the cold metallic heart of the Imperial Vanguard, Commodore Zalvek stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture as rigid as the throne-like command seat before him. The Imperial fleet drifted just beyond the Kuiper Belt, its presence masked by powerful signal-jamming fields, its ships arranged in a formation of calculated menace. A subordinate approached, bowing his head in the manner demanded by Imperial protocol. We are in position, Commodore. Probes have been deployed. No signs of significant resistance detected. Zalvek barely acknowledged him. His gaze was fixed on the void ahead, where the human system lay, a pale, unremarkable star at the heart of an irrelevant sector. The reports suggested fleet movements, Zalvek said, his voice slow, deliberate. And yet, we see nothing. The officer hesitated. Perhaps their technology is too primitive for effective long-range warfare. Their ships could still be clustered near their homeworld, unaware of our approach. Zalvek's lip curled slightly, a motion that, in his species, signified distaste. No, I do not believe that. He gestured toward the holomap, where Earth and its surrounding space were displayed in crisp clinical detail. They are hiding something. The humans are cunning creatures. We must assume the worst until we are certain. His fingers hovered over the control interface. With a single press, he could send the order. A fleet-wide advance, a preliminary strike, a purge, and yet something held him back. Initiate deep scans, he ordered instead. Find them. The officer hesitated. With respect, sir, our cloaking fields will be compromised if we... Do it! Zalvek snapped. The command was obeyed. At once, the Imperial fleet's long-range scanners activated, sending out pulses of high-frequency energy across the void. They swept through the outer system, piercing asteroid fields, brushing against the Oort cloud. The Empire's technology was the most advanced in the known galaxy. No known vessel could escape its sight. And yet the readings came back empty. No fleet movements, no military installations, nothing but dead space. Zalvek frowned. That is not possible. He stepped forward, staring at the readings as if his very will could force them to change. Expand the search grid. Scan again. Still, nothing. There was no human fleet, no enemy movements, no trace of warships lying in wait. But Zalvek knew better. Something was out there. Something watching. Deep in the Oort cloud, aboard the Oblivion, Mara, Voss watched the Imperial fleet's scanning waves pass over them, their powerful signals brushing against the ship's hull. Any normal vessel, even the most advanced stealth cruiser in the human fleet, would have been detected instantly. But the Oblivion was not a normal vessel. Every piece of its design had been engineered for this very moment. Its hull plating absorbed energy signatures instead of reflecting them. Its emissions were scattered into the cosmic background noise. Its presence, to the Empire's scanners, was nothing more than a void, an absence where no absence should be. The Imperial fleet did not know it, but they had already lost. Voss turned to Rourke, a slow smile spreading across her face. They're looking right at us. Rourke nodded, arms folded across his chest. And they see nothing. For the first time in the Empire's long history, it was blind. And that meant, for the first time in history, it was vulnerable. The Oblivion remained utterly still, a shadow against the cosmic backdrop. Its hull, a masterpiece of human ingenuity and stolen alien technology, absorbed every ripple of electromagnetic radiation, rendering it indistinguishable from the vacuum around it. The Empire's scanning pulses washed over it again and again, but to their instruments, it was as if the ship simply did not exist. Inside, the bridge was silent except for the quiet hum of monitors and the distant rhythmic beeping of an artificial heartbeat, the ship's core system, monitoring the Empire's every move. The atmosphere was thick with tension, but not fear. Every crew member aboard the Oblivion had trained for this moment, had prepared for the reality of facing an empire that outgunned them in every conceivable way. And yet, they were not afraid. They were waiting. Commander Elias Rourke stood at the center of it all, his sharp gaze locked onto the tactical display. He had the calm of a seasoned predator, a man who understood that war was not about brute force, but precision. The Empire expected humanity to fight like all others before them, directly, foolishly, within the confines of predictable engagements. But Rourke had no intention of playing by their rules. Lieutenant Mara Voss leaned forward, her gloved fingers gliding over the controls. They've rescanned 3 times, she murmured, eyes narrowed. They know something's off. But they can't pinpoint us. Rourke exhaled slowly. Good. That means they're getting nervous. From the far side of the bridge, Weapons Officer Jensen Knox spoke, his voice as steady as the ship itself. We have firing solutions on their vanguard. We could cripple one of their scouts, send a message. Rourke considered the suggestion for a long moment, watching the Imperial fleet's slow, methodical movements. There was a time when humanity had fought wars with overwhelming force, believing in honor and rules of engagement. But this was not a war of honor. This was survival. And survival required something the Empire had never encountered before. A ghost that could strike without warning. He turned toward Knox. No half measures. If we hit them hard. We don't send a message. We send a funeral. Voss smirked. I like that plan. Rourke gestured toward the display. What's the weakest link in their formation? Knox's fingers danced over his console, highlighting a trio of smaller vessels. They're scout ships, lightly armored, positioned just ahead of the main fleet. These 3 are running point on their scans. They're relaying data back to the flagship. Rourke's expression darkened. Then we break their eyes first. Aboard the Imperial flagship Venerated Dominion, Commodore Zalvek stood motionless as the reports streamed in. 3 scout ships, 3 deep-range scans. No anomalies detected. Yet, something still felt wrong. "Status of the Vanguard?" he asked. A bridge officer responded immediately, his tone sharp with efficiency. "All systems normal. They are continuing their search pattern." Then, without warning, the screen flickered. Static. Then silence. Zalvek's mandibles twitched, his species equivalent of a furrowed brow. "Repeat that," he ordered. The officer tried again, his fingers moving over the console with growing urgency. We've lost contact with Thrallus 1. A ripple of unease spread across the bridge. Losing a scout ship was not unheard of. Technical. Malfunctions, asteroid collisions. But losing contact with no warning? "Send a secondary ping," Zalvek commanded, his tone cold. The officer obeyed. The command pulsed out into the void. No response. Then another alert flashed across the screen. "Sir, Thrallus 2 has gone dark." Zalvek's pulse quickened. "Thrallus 3, respond immediately." Static. The bridge fell into a dead silence. 3 ships, 3 losses. No distress signals, no escape pods, no trace. This was not a battle. This was erasure. Zalvek clenched his fists. "Bring the fleet to battle readiness, now." The alarm klaxons rang across the venerated Dominion, echoing through its vast corridors. Officers scrambled to their stations. The Empire had fought countless wars across the centuries. They had crushed resistance, exterminated insurgents, and erased civilizations that dared to oppose them, but never had an enemy taken their ships without leaving so much as a trace. This was no rebellion. This was something else, something they didn't understand, and that terrified them. Aboard the Oblivion, Rourke stood unmoving as the tactical display shifted, confirming 3 kills. Not a single countermeasure had been deployed, no evasive actions taken. The Empire had not even realized what had happened until it was over. The bridge crew exhaled almost in unison. "All 3 targets neutralized," Knox reported, voice level but taut with adrenaline. "No survivors, no transmissions." Voss leaned back in her chair, shaking her head. "They still have no idea what hit them." Rourke's gaze remained locked onto the Imperial fleet. Their formation had begun to shift, moving from passive scanning to active combat readiness. The Empire was rattled. "Good. Prepare for Phase 2, he said. Knox hesitated for the first time. "We're taking out their forward fleet?" Rourke shook his head. "No. That would give them an enemy to fight. And right now, they have nothing." Voss arched a brow. "So, what's Phase 2? A slow smile crossed Rourke's face. "We let them panic." The venerated Dominion's bridge was a symphony of controlled chaos. Officers scurried between stations, their alien forms moving with rigid efficiency. But no amount of protocol could mask the unease settling into the room. The Empire did not lose ships. The Empire did not lose anything without reason. Yet 3 scout vessels had vanished in complete silence, wiped from existence as if they had never been. Commodore Zalvek stood rigid at the command dais, his yellow eyes sweeping over the incoming reports. His kind, Thelani, prided themselves on precision, on an empire built on the pillars of superior intelligence, military doctrine, and technological dominance. In over 6 centuries of recorded warfare, never had an enemy evaded their sensors so completely. This was a phantom war, and Zalvek hated phantoms. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Dryle, approached, his deep blue carapace gleaming under the bridge lights. His mandibles clicked once, a gesture of tension. "Sir," Dryle began, voice kept carefully even. "Our scans detected no energy signatures, no weapon trails. The enemy left no debris, no wreckage. It is as if our scouts never existed." Zalvek's nostrils flared. "Then it was not an accident." Dryle hesitated. "No, sir. It was a statement." Zalvek's gaze flicked to the distant starfield, his mind calculating. This was an enemy unlike any he had faced. The loss of 3 scouts was a deliberate act, surgical, precise, and impossibly clean. If this force had wished to strike with full force, they could have done so. Instead, they had done something worse. They had waited. "Order the fleet to tighten formation," Zalvek commanded. "No vessels are to stray beyond the main battle group. Increase energy field sweeps. Prepare the dreadnoughts for wide-spectrum bombardment, if necessary." Dryle hesitated again, It was a small hesitation, a fraction of a second, but Zalvek noticed. "You doubt me?" the Commodore asked, his voice like cold steel. Drell's mandibles twitched. "No, sir. I doubt our understanding of the situation." Zalvek said nothing. He simply watched as the Empire's once perfect formation tightened inward, ships clustering closer together, their shields overlapping into a near-impenetrable lattice. It was a flawless defensive maneuver, one that had crushed dozens of insurrections across the stars. But something gnawed at him. The enemy was out there, unseen, unchallenged, and they had no reason to play by the Empire's rules. Aboard the Oblivion, a quiet tension settled over the crew. They had just done the impossible. 3 kills, 3 confirmed eliminations, and the enemy had not even fired a shot in response. But they weren't out of danger yet. Commander Rourke stood with his arms crossed, watching the enemy fleet shift into a defensive posture. "They're scared," Knox muttered, breaking the silence. "Look at that formation. That's a fortress." Rourke nodded, his eyes cold with calculation. "Good. The more they focus inward, the more blind they become to the space around them." Lieutenant Voss studied the tactical readout. "They're running full-spectrum scans now. Energy sweeps, thermal scans, even neutrino bursts. They're throwing everything they have at the dark." Knox smirked. "And they're still going to find nothing. The Oblivion's stealth systems were beyond anything the Empire had ever encountered. It wasn't just an advanced cloaking field. It was a complete absence of presence. Every system aboard the ship had been built with one singular goal: to erase its existence from enemy detection. No ion trails, no residual heat signatures, no electronic noise. The ship was, for all intents and purposes, a ghost in the void. The Empire's technology was formidable, but it had one fatal flaw. It relied on the assumption that all enemies could be seen. "Status on our next move?" Rourke asked. Voss's fingers moved swiftly over the console. "The fleet's dreadnoughts are bringing their main weapons online. If they can't find us, they'll start blind firing. A calculated move. The Empire had the firepower to wipe entire fleets from existence. If they could not see their enemy, they would turn space into a kill zone and let raw firepower do the work." Rourke exhaled slowly. "Then we move before they get the chance." Knox raised an eyebrow. "You want to hit them again?" A small, humorless smile crossed Rourke's lips. "No. I want them to hit each other." The venerated Dominion's bridge was a storm of energy. Commanding officers barked orders, their voices rising as tension gripped them. The Empire had prepared for wars of attrition, for planetary invasions, for large-scale engagements where overwhelming force dictated the terms of surrender. But this was something new. "Sir," a comms officer called out. "New readings. An energy distortion bearing 317 Mark II, Zalvek snapped to attention. "On screen!" The main view screen flickered, and for the first time, something appeared in the void. It was faint, barely perceptible against the cosmic backdrop. But it was there. A flicker of movement, a distortion in space itself. Zalvek's eyes narrowed. "Weapons!" Before he could finish, the distortion split. One signature became 2, then 4, then 7. A deception field. It was impossible. No known technology could create multiple energy distortions with this level of complexity. But there it was. 7 distinct false signals, each one mimicking the heat and motion of a fully functional warship. "Commodore," another officer called. "Our targeting systems are locking onto all 7 contacts. Enemy vessels confirmed." Zalvek's mind raced. His fleet was already primed for battle. They were in tight formation. If the enemy was moving now, they would have no time to reposition, no time to— He saw it too late. One of the Empire's heavy cruisers, Vexarian, unleashed its primary ion cannons. A massive bolt of blue energy lanced into the dark, striking one of the phantom contacts. It passed straight through, and hit another Imperial ship dead on. The impact was catastrophic. The Vexarian's weapons had been calibrated for fleet-destroying firepower. The unfortunate ship caught in the blast, Vorak's spear, stood no chance. Its shields flared, then collapsed, and a heartbeat later, a secondary explosion ripped its hull apart, a friendly kill. The Empire had just shot itself, aboard the Oblivion, Silence filled the bridge as the explosion bloomed across the view screen. Then, Knox let out a low whistle. Well, that's one way to start a civil war. Voss grinned. They won't recover from that easily. Rourke exhaled, watching the Imperial fleet shift into full confusion. No, they won't, and that's just the beginning. They had just turned the Empire's greatest strength, their discipline, their overwhelming force, against itself. And the nightmare was only beginning. Aboard the venerated Dominion, chaos reigned. The bridge, once a model of cold, calculating efficiency, now trembled under the weight of confusion and fear. The explosion had been so sudden, so impossible, that even the Thelani officers, beings conditioned from birth to suppress emotional responses, were struggling to maintain order. A full-scale battle had nearly erupted within their own fleet. Weapons officers aboard multiple ships had reacted instinctively, targeting the ghostly distortions in the void, only to strike their own allies. It was not an attack. It was not a battle. It was a nightmare they could not wake from. "Cease fire!" Commodore Zalvek roared, his voice slicing through the rising din like a plasma whip. "All ships, disengage weapons immediately!" Sub-Commander Dryle, his mandibles trembling with tension, barely managed to re-establish fleet-wide communications. "Sir, we've lost the Vorax spear completely. Multiple ships reporting system malfunctions. Targeting arrays are confused. We're detecting enemy vessels, but the readings keep shifting. Our own ships are targeting each other by mistake." Zalvek clenched his fists, his claws digging into his palms. This was deliberate. Whoever they were facing, they understood the Thelani's military doctrine in ways no enemy ever had. The Empire's fleets relied on centralized coordination, precise formations, and superior firing solutions. And this enemy had turned those strengths into a fatal liability. The Dreadnought. Imperium's Wrath had just fired another plasma lance at a suspected hostile, only for the beam to strike the harbinger of order, gutting its lower decks. The explosion rippled through space, sending a shockwave that knocked nearby ships off course. Zalvek felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Every instinct screamed at him to strike back, to unleash the full wrath of the Empire and wipe this enemy from existence. But how could he fight something he couldn't see? Then, a single transmission came through. A voice. A human voice. Aboard the Oblivion, Commander Rourke stood with his arms crossed, watching the Imperial fleet teeter on the edge of collapse. The Empire's Wrath had just finished destroying one of its own ships, and panic was beginning to set in among their ranks. "Now," he said simply. Voss nodded and activated the comms array, transmitting a message on an open frequency. A message designed not to intimidate nor to bargain, but to drive the final wedge of paranoia into the heart of the Empire's fleet. A smooth, controlled voice, artificially distorted to be just unsettling enough, echoed through the vastness of space. "You never saw us coming, and you'll never see us leave." The bridge of the venerated Dominion fell silent. Zalvek's eyes widened. The words were not a threat, not a challenge, they were a fact. Dryle turned slowly to his commander. "Sir, they're inside our encrypted channels." It was impossible. The Thelani Empire's communication network was fortified by quantum-locked encryption. No known species had ever been able to breach it, let alone without detection. Yet the humans had. Rourke's voice came through again, calm, unwavering. "You have no war to fight, only ghosts. Continue, and you will not survive the night." Zalvek's claws trembled. This was not an enemy playing by the Empire's rules. This was not a rebellion to crush. This was something new. And for the first time in his long career, Commodore Zalvek felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. On the Oblivion, the crew watched as the Imperial fleet hesitated. Confusion rippled through their ranks. Ships slowly ceased fire, unsure whether they were actually under attack or simply caught in a waking nightmare. Knox let out a low whistle. "Think they'll break?" Rourke studied the fleet for a long moment before responding. "No, not yet, but they're close." "Should we push harder?" Voss asked. Rourke considered it. They had already shattered the Empire's confidence, but there was still one final step. They had to make the Empire afraid to chase them, afraid to ever cross humanity again. A slow, deadly smile formed on his lips. "Prepare for Phase 3, he said. "We're going to make them believe in ghosts." Aboard the venerated Dominion, silence hung like a heavy shroud. Commodore Zalvek stood frozen, his mind struggling to process the sheer magnitude of what had just happened. The fleet, the greatest the Empire had assembled in this sector, had been reduced to paranoia and self-destruction by a single human warship. It was impossible. And yet, his fleet's burning wreckage told a different story. His mandibles twitched as he turned to his officers. "They have breached our encryption. They have infiltrated our systems. This is no mere battle. This is psychological warfare on a scale the Empire has never faced before." Dryle hesitated before responding. "Sir, should we initiate a full retreat?" Retreat. The word tasted like ash in Zalvek's mouth. A Thalani Imperial fleet did not retreat. And yet, what other option remained? They were fighting an invisible enemy, one that had turned their own weapons against them. How do you fight a war against ghosts? Before he could respond, the ship's main interface flickered, and then the lights went out. A hum vibrated through the ship, deep and resonant, like the rumble of a predator circling its prey. The emergency lighting flickered erratically, casting shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. The main view screen flashed back to life, but instead of the fleet's tactical readout, it displayed a single image. A vast, silent warship, black as the abyss, drifting through the void with unnatural grace. The Oblivion. But not just one. There were hundreds of them. A ghost fleet, materializing from the darkness like specters of war. No heat signatures, no reactor readings, just endless, shifting shadows, moving like wraiths across the battlefield. Dryle gasped, his composure slipping. This is a deception. It has to be. Yet the fleet's sensors, flawless in their precision, unshaken even in the heat of battle, insisted otherwise. Zalvek's hands trembled. If this was a deception, it was the greatest in galactic history. Then, the comms crackled again. The same human voice. But this time, it was everywhere. "The Empire is already dead. You just haven't realized it yet." On the Oblivion, Rourke watched as the Imperial fleet collapsed under its own terror. The Ghost Fleet was nothing more than a projection, highly sophisticated, designed to exploit the Thalani's blind obedience to their technology. Human stealth systems had allowed them to infiltrate the enemy's networks. Now, they were feeding them a nightmare they couldn't escape from. "How long until they break completely?" Knox muttered. Voss studied the readouts. "Less than 5 minutes. Their command structure is fracturing. They don't trust their own sensors anymore. They don't know what's real." Rourke nodded. "Then let's finish it." With a simple gesture, he activated the next phase. The Oblivion pulsed, its true form emerging from the darkness like a specter reborn. Its weapons flickered to life, but instead of firing, it released a single, deliberate signal across all Thalani channels. A single phrase: "Run." Aboard the venerated Dominion, that single word shattered the last remnants of discipline. Zalvek watched in horror as his fleet, his once mighty, unstoppable fleet, began to scatter. Officers abandoning formation, entire warships breaking rank, the proud armada dissolving into chaos. Some ships fired wildly into the void, hoping to kill the ghosts that haunted them. Others simply fled, their captains choosing disgrace over annihilation. "Order them back," Zalvek snarled. "They will die before they dishonor the Empire." Drayle's voice was barely above a whisper. "They already think they're dead, sir." Zalvek's breathing grew ragged. His people, his empire, had been undone not by brute force, but by fear, by humanity. His claws curled into fists. "This cannot be how we fall." But as he watched his once mighty fleet fade into the darkness, hunted by shadows that did not exist, he knew. It was already over. On the Oblivion, the battle was finished. Rourke let out a slow breath as he watched the Thalani fleet disintegrate in real time. "That's it," Voss confirmed. "They're running. We did it." Knox grinned. "Damn. We really just took down the most powerful fleet in the sector without firing a shot." Rourke exhaled, his gaze still fixed on the retreating remnants of the Empire. "Not just a fleet, Knox. We killed something bigger than that today." He turned. the weight of their victory settling onto his shoulders. We killed the illusion that the Empire was untouchable, and in its place, humanity's legend was born. The aftermath of the battle left the Thalani Empire in ruins on the venerated Dominion. Commodore Zalvek stood on the bridge, staring out into the vast emptiness of space, his gaze fixed on the retreating shadow of the human warship fleet. His once pristine uniform, a symbol of the Empire's unassailable might, was now wrinkled, disheveled from the chaos of the past hours. His mind, once sharp and unwavering, was now clouded with doubt. He had witnessed the unthinkable. The Thalani Empire, unmatched in technology, in military strategy, in all things, had been reduced to a mere shadow of its former glory by human ingenuity. They had not lost in the traditional sense. No, that would have been too simple. The Thalani had been undone by fear. Fear of an enemy they could neither see nor comprehend. The threat humanity posed was not in their weaponry, not in the scale of their ships, or the power of their firepower. No, it was in their adaptability, their ability to think outside of the lines. Humanity had defeated them through psychological warfare, turning their own military doctrine against them with nothing more than shadows and fear. "Commodore," Sub-Commander Dryle spoke, his voice trembling slightly, "we have received reports from all fleets. Nearly 2/3 of the Armada has either been disabled or fled the battlefield entirely. We are in full retreat." Zalvek didn't respond immediately. The words reverberated in his mind. Full retreat. The Thalani Empire, a force that had once conquered entire star systems with indifference, was now fleeing from a single human warship. "You're suggesting surrender, Sub-Commander?" Zalvek asked, his voice cold. Dryle hesitated, then spoke softly. "There are no other options, sir. The humans, they've won. We can't fight what we can't even see." Zalvek's claws flexed in anger, but his rational mind knew Dryle was right. They couldn't afford to lose any more ships. They had to fall back, regroup, and rethink their approach. But even as he gave the order to retreat, part of him wondered if there was anything left to save. But there was still one final blow to land. Across the battlefield, the few remaining Thalani warships were disappearing into the void, their communications desperately attempting to make sense of the ghost fleet that had vanished as mysteriously as it had arrived. The humans had left, behind no debris, no remnants to study. They were like shadows slipping into the dark, their victory sealed without a single shot being fired. On the Oblivion, Commander Rourke watched the last of the Thalani warships retreat into the black expanse of space. His expression was unreadable, the weight of their success settling over him. They had accomplished something no one had thought possible. They had crushed an empire, not with force, but with a battle of wills. "Is it over?" Voss asked, watching the fading traces of the Thalani ships. "For them," Rourke replied. "But this is just the beginning." The victory had been swift, precise, and utterly devastating. But humanity's victory was not just a military one. They had struck a blow at the heart of the galactic hierarchy. The belief that the Thalani Empire was untouchable, that no force could withstand its power. Rourke turned his gaze toward the stars, toward the future they had now carved for themselves. "We've shown them what humanity is capable of," he said. "We've shown them that we are no longer beneath them, that we never were." Back on Earth, news of the conflict spread quickly, but its implications were far greater than anyone realized. Governments, military leaders, and civilians alike had all watched as humanity not only survived a threat from one of the most advanced empires in the galaxy, but had defeated it. At the forefront of the global media frenzy was the truth. Humanity, once just a small, insignificant species on the fringes of the universe, had taken their place on the galactic stage. No longer would they be the underestimated, the ignored. They had made their mark, and no one would ever forget it. The venerated Dominion's communications network crackled back to life, this time with a new order: to stand down. The Empire's war machine, once so efficient and unstoppable, was now crumbling under its own weight. Zalvek's orders were cold, methodical, but they carried no hope. The Oblivion had already made its way into deep space, leaving behind the wreckage of a broken empire. They had struck when the moment was right, and now humanity stood on the brink of something far more significant than they could fully comprehend. The Thelani might retreat, but the galactic landscape had changed. Humanity was no longer just a species struggling to survive. They were now a force to be reckoned with. They had earned their place among the stars. The Empire, once a symbol of power, would now have to reckon with the fact that humanity, the species they had once dismissed as weak, had just brought them to their knees. The Oblivion moved farther into the darkness, its silhouette a symbol of humanity's unrelenting will, and in the distance, behind them, the Thelani fleet scattered, shattered by their own fear, lost in the vastness of space. Humanity had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy for centuries to come. The message was simple, but its power was undeniable. Never underestimate humanity. And with that, the galaxy would never be the same again.